Hello, my name is Andrew Phillips. Today I'll be presenting about athletic reputation as it relates to competitive success. From small children with their friends to adults and teenagers competing in the Olympics, there's a competitive nature to swimming that spans across the entire world. In these competitions, there's reputation that comes into play. For example, in the Olympics, there's never anybody asking, is the USA going to win this year? Everyone knows that the USA is going to win because of our fantastic international athletic reputation. However, I'm focusing on the collegiate swimming athletic reputation because swimmers have the choices of which college that they compete for, but not the country they compete for. Because of that, when a swimmer chooses a college, if they can, they'll choose the school that has the absolute best program that will prepare them in the best possible way for major competitions. So this athletic reputation is important for future college swimmers to know which school has the best rep, but also for onlookers because they can have a better understanding of these events with the knowledge that a Team A is probably going to perform a lot better than Team B, or vice versa. Swimming certainly has its niche, making it a very unique sport, but as I myself am a varsity swimmer here at school, it's the sport that I love the most, and I have a strong passion for it, which is why I chose to study specifically swimming. For my research, I'm looking at the 2021 to 2022 competitive athletic reputation of schools across America. A problem statement: there are no research reports that I've read so far discussing the reputation of a school as a predictor of championship success on a national level with regards to swimming specifically. There's many studies that look into a version of this with other sports, but I'm filling in a gap with my research alongside others by talking specifically about the athletic reputation of a school's swimming program. Schools could truly benefit from my research, understanding how their performance and efforts might influence their results in the championship competition. Because of this, I want to research the question: what exactly is it that composes this concept of athletic reputation? Then I want to go into not only what constitutes an athletic reputation, but also how much of an effect it may or may not have on the performance of the team at the national championships. The first source that I examined was from Do-Yeon Won and his colleague Pakianathan Seshadurag, who provided a super helpful background for my understanding. They set out to understand why some college programs are achieving competitive success and why others aren't, even if they both have similar tangible resources, such as money. For that reason, they investigated intangible resources, which they considered to be things such as reputation, athletic reputation, using a correlational study, which is what I did. They helped me because they first showed me that I know whatever results I find should indicate that athletic reputation does, in fact, quite highly influence the athletic performance that I measure. However, while Won's correlation helped me decide on a method and his results provide groundwork for what I should be looking for, his method for determining the athletic reputation doesn't really help me. This is because his definition of athletic reputation is the athletic reputation of a school as a whole, not of an individual sport at the school. So while his research allowed me to say in the end, look, I got similar results, I had to find another literature which provides a strong basis in data points in an individual sport that compose athletic reputation for that sport. And I did find that source. A Rutgers professor named D. Randall Smith did a similar study to Won, where he examined the athletic success as an influence on enrollment yield from 1994 to 2014. He set out to determine how much of an effect reputation has on matriculation at competitive NCAA D1 schools, again, using a correlational method. What he found in one sentence was that if a team does well, then talented students' matriculation should increase by about 8% the following year. What this means for me is that if a school has a great athletic reputation from one year, then it should result in an even better reputation the next year. Another thing that Smith did, which gave me great legitimacy, was to define the athletic reputation of a school's football and basketball teams. I end up modeling my own system in part after his, because he uses different factors for each sport, which allows me to then use more factors for swim. Because if he used the same for football and basketball, and I don't have a comparable factor for swim, then I can't use it. But because he uses unique ones, I can add more unique ones. Another great thing that Smith's research does for me is that he uses different factors, as I said, because I can then find comparable factors. He also, to come up with his score, simply sums each numerical value for each data point instead of weighting some data to create more scores biased towards a certain data point. To create my scale, ensuring that each data point is based in academic rationale, I quantify each of these four factors that you see on the screen. First, we have meet performance during the 21 to 22 season, which is essentially regular season games for swimming. Second, 2022 conference championships, which is about as close to a postseason as swimming gets. Third, I have the cumulative score from the survey that I sent to coaches from these elite teams who are competing at the championships, which included data on how much they prepared their athletes, such as emphasis on strength and conditioning, diet, and time spent in the water. Fourth and last, I have the score given by the College Swimming and Diving Coaches Association of America, because that was a comparable metric to a professional metric that Professor Smith used. In summary, I want to get a numerical value for athletic reputation and primarily correlate that with the 2022 championship placement. To gather my results, I did 5 correlations. The first was to more broadly look at how successful my research was compared to professionals, and the other 4 were actually looking at my research question. My first correlation was between athletic reputation as I defined it a couple slides ago, and the professional reputation as college coaches define it, which was done to add legitimacy to my scale. If my numbers are aligning very closely with the numbers published by the guys who get paid to do it, then that's showing my numbers aren't just random. What I got was a correlation, as you can see, of 0.674, which according to the British Medical Journal is a strong correlation. In any case, it shows that I have produced a scale which is pretty accurate as far as being parallel to professional estimates. The next correlation was the big test for me. Does my scale prove itself worth its salt? To my dismay, not quite. Here the correlation coefficient was 0.525, which admittedly is a moderate correlation, but it's not strong. It does show that my scale produced moderately accurate results. Not perfect though. As you can see on my graph here, the 2 teams I collected data from that performed the best were actually the 2 teams that were closest to the line of best fit. So one of my questions that I want to look into from here on is, why exactly and how did I find a system that works well for the highest achievers in the field, but produces seemingly random results for the teams at the bottom? Next, I looked in depth at some of the details that I added. Some of the variables I wanted to test for were things like, some of the variables I wanted to test for were things that were even more niche to college swimming than maybe something like, how did you perform during the season? You can ask that about any sport. I want to look at factors about how the schools are preparing for competition specific to swimming, not just how they perform when the cameras are running. I justify including this in my scale, along with the next 2 factors that I'll review, because it's all leading up to that national championship. This information, however, is not necessarily going to be shouted from the rooftops, advertised. More likely, swimmer XYZ might know that school A does this and school B doesn't. Again, that's something that insiders are going to know more of. But they're also the same people who are competing at the national championship. So I wanted to see if this aspect of a more private niche reputation contributed much to national success as the public reputation does. What I found was first that strength and conditioning contributes almost not at all to a national championship placement with a correlation of 0.108. I found a similar trend with diet where it produced a coefficient of negative 0.025. The real shocker was practice length, where I found a correlation coefficient of actually negative 0.384. And this is a moderate correlation. It's not just a very weak negative that could be random with a diet. It's actually moderate. And furthermore, again, as I said, it's negative, so that's what I want to look into from here. I want to understand, why is it that swimming teams who are scoring higher at regular season games perform so well in the national championship, yet the way those teams prepare for any competition is such a bad predictor of their success? At first I thought the programs have become so standardized that these factors I added, the more privately reputable ones, are simply not distinguishing factors anymore. But the answer I find comes once again from Professor Smith's study. In that study, I remind you, he showed that by a team performing well, they should receive up to 8% more talented athletes the next year. Thus, my athletic reputation factors that derive from his work correspond very well with this statement, such as points scored. However, my added factors do not correspond as well because there is simply not enough data to understand how this more private reputation might impact the national championship. I didn't add those factors with a strong basis in the literature. So the explanation is really rather simple, and that's that what has more of an effect on collegiate success is that long-term reputation, the year over year, as Professor Smith showed, and not necessarily what I measured, which is mostly the athletic reputation from just 1 year, the more short term. I did encounter about four limitations in my research. The first 3 were more minor. So first I dealt with a small population size, which meant that it was hard to find statistical significance. But I had a population of 49 teams who competed in the national championship. And with 11 teams who I was able to collect data from, I've got 22% of the population represented, which is very good as far as surveys go. In the same vein, correlation does not equal causation, as simple as that. Just because I'm getting high or low correlations doesn't mean there is or is not causation present. Third, I did not review women, and the simple reason for that is that I'm not as familiar with women's swimming. I spend all my time with men's swimming, as that's what I'm familiar with, and so including women's swimming would mean double the work for me, and I also wouldn't be familiar with the times, and I wouldn't be as maybe legitimate with the research that I did. The biggest limitation for me, however, was applicability. To illustrate my point, here's a photo of the most successful collegiate swimmer from both 2022 national championships and this year's 23s. He won every single thing he swam this year by 6 full seconds in the case of one of his events. This guy's like the Michael Jordan of swimming right now. And if this were football or basketball, you would all know who he is, but you don't. Because unless you're so involved in swimming that you know not only Olympians, but also college swimmers, you just simply won't know this guy. Because of that, my results are not as applicable as they would be if I had studied a more mainstream, broadly accessible sport. So bringing it back to my results and my conclusions about them, I'll review what I've talked about. I conducted 5 correlations to examine the accuracy and validity of athletic reputation as I've defined it, and I tested whether it was a good predictor or not of national championship success in college swimming. My first correlation between my athletic reputation scale and professional reputation, as defined by college coaches, produced a strong correlation of 0.674, indicating that my scale was relatively accurate. However, my scale was only moderately accurate in predicting national championship success, with a correlation coefficient of 0.525. I also looked at more niche factors such as strength and conditioning, diet, and practice length, but I found that these did not significantly contribute to success in the national championship due to a lack of long-term effects, considering I only looked into the 2021 to 2022 athletic season. Instead, long-term athletic reputation from the one-year study was a better predictor of success, although my assigned athletic reputation was still a good predictor of success at the national championships. Thank you.
Terrific. Andrew, I've got a few questions for you, and then we'll wrap this thing up.
Sounds good.
So for the first one, how did you determine which results that were generated by your research method were the most important to put in front of us?
Okay, so I did do a correlation between the NCAA placements and the College Swimming and Diving Coaches Association of America, long name there. But I decided that wasn't very important because that was just verifying the validity of one of the pieces of my scale. But I had already seen a similar metric used by Professor Smith in his study, and so I knew that it was already academically legitimate, and so I realized that was not as important. With regard to other results, I knew that the results that I had generated were the ones that I sought from the beginning, and I therefore put those in front of you.
Okay, awesome. As a follow-up question to that, and you addressed this a little bit, but I want to hear you say it again, what are the real-world implications or consequences related to your findings? How is your research applicable?
Sure. So in my research, again, as I said, a limitation is that it's not as applicable to the mainstream, but to people who are really involved in swimming, such as club swimmers, guys who are swimming in high school, they can look at my research and see how I've defined athletic reputation, or maybe how the college swimming and diving coaches have. But specifically with mine, since I'm getting great results for those high-end schools, swimmers who are really hopeful to achieve a commitment at a really high-end school will be able to look at my scale and see, look, here's who the best schools are with regard to their reputation. And for onlookers who maybe enjoy watching, they'll just have a better understanding of who has the high reputation, who's seeded to win, who's not.
Okay, terrific. And then as a final question, if you could revisit your entire process, is there anything that you would change? And if so, what would you do differently, and why would you do it differently?
Sure. So the main thing that I would do differently is make sure I set out with a more focused, tunnel vision sort of goal from the beginning. I had a huge array of things that I wanted to cover since August, really, but it took me 2 or 3 months to really to get to my research of athletic reputation. I initially started talking about the hard science and the physics behind swimming, and that was a huge waste of time for me since, as you can see, I didn't actually end up researching that, and so I would have made sure that I had a much more clear goal at the beginning so that I would have had time to produce even better results than I did.
Okay, fantastic.